The two TK8 panel modules, Combo and Multimask, serve very different purposes. They can each be used independently or in conjunction with each other, whatever fits your workflow. Multimask's main job is creating, modifying, and applying a variety of advanced Photoshop masks, such as luminosity masks, to help you achieve fine control over your image adjustments. We'll come back to Multimask later in this course, so I'll close it for now. Let's focus on learning about the features of the Combo and CX modules. As we know, Combo and CX are actually just the same module in different shapes. This gives you flexibility in how you customize your Photoshop workspace to best fit your screen and the way you work. I personally use the CX module, so I'm going to be referencing that, but everything I show applies to the Combo module as well. And to keep it simple, I'll just close the Combo module. The Combo and CX modules are command centers for Photoshop. They give us quick and easy access to the Photoshop tools that photographers use the most. One of the challenges of Photoshop is that it can do so many things, quite a few of which are for things like graphic design, 3D modeling, and illustration, and not specific to photography. The commands and controls of Photoshop are often buried deep in menus and submenus, or they're in panels or panel menus, or you need to know the keyboard shortcuts. Even when you know exactly where something is, getting to it in the menus and submenus can often take time, or setting something up in Photoshop can require multiple steps. The Combo and CX modules give you direct access to the most important Photoshop features right out here in the workspace with color codes and icons for easy visibility, and many of these can complete multiple step processes with just a single click. The Combo and CX modules also streamline many complex Photoshop tasks, such as sizing and sharpening images for the web, placing watermarks on images, and applying creative adjustments such as the Orton effect or using frequency separation. It even allows you to program and run your own actions right in the Combo and CX modules. Let's begin by looking at some of the general features in the Combo module. Right-clicking on any button color tags it. So if I right-click on Duplicate Image, notice that it gets brighter orange. You can do this with any button in the module. This is really useful for highlighting your favorite buttons or the ones that you use the most. And if you ever want to unhighlight them or untag them, you just right-click on them again and they go back to their original colors. Clicking the TK logo opens the module settings. The button color slider allows you to turn the colors up to make them brighter or turn them down to make them almost grayscale. Some people prefer to keep their workspace more neutral, while others feel bright colored buttons are easier to see, so this allows you to modify them as you like. The panel text has been translated into 6 different languages, so you can pick the one from this list that suits you best. The 5 checkboxes below come checked by default, but you can uncheck any of them to modify the panel's behavior. With Show Tooltips checked, button descriptions show up as you roll over any buttons. So as you roll over the panel, whatever you're hovering over, you get a description or an explanation of what it does. And that's true for every button in the entire module. If you uncheck this box, then the tooltips will not show up as you hover over them. But if you'd still like a hint on some buttons, you can hold down the Alt or Option key, and then now the tooltips will show up as you hover. And then when you stop holding down the Alt or the Option key, the tooltips will go away. So in that way, you can get hints as you want them. When Selection Indicator is checked, anytime that you have an active selection, a colored border appears around the outside of the module. The Selection Indicator is particularly useful for reminding you if you have a selection that's hidden or a selection in which no marching ants are visible. Unchecking the Selection Indicator box disables the Selection Indicator if for some reason you don't want to use it. The Smart Object Indicator is a really cool new feature if you use smart objects in Photoshop. If you don't use smart objects in Photoshop and you'd be interested in learning, you might like my course called Complete Guide to Smart Object Techniques. Here's how this indicator works. If you're on a layer that is not a smart object, this one's not, then the Smart Object button here in the module has no border around it. So that indicates that this is not a smart object. If I would like to convert this layer into a smart object, I can click that button and it'll convert it to a smart object. Smart objects in Photoshop have this little smart object icon that matches the icon on the smart object button. However, there are different kinds of smart objects, and unfortunately, no matter which kind of smart object it is, it looks identical to this one in Photoshop. The icon is the same for all the different kinds of smart objects, so that can make it difficult to remember what kind of smart object you're working with. However, when you have a smart object layer active or selected by clicking on it, and you see a border around that smart object button, it tells you what kind of smart object you're looking at. When you click on a smart object layer and you see that red border around the smart object button, this lets you know that that smart object was created in Photoshop and was not opened as a raw smart object. And we already saw that. This was not opened as a raw smart object. I created the smart object right here in Photoshop, and it's telling us that with the red border. However, if I open this same raw image from Lightroom, instead of just opening it as a regular image file, if I open it as a raw smart object from Lightroom, now when that smart object is selected, I see a blue border around the smart object button, and that lets me know that this is a raw smart object. So it was opened as a smart object from the raw file in Lightroom, and that this raw smart object is not linked to any other raw smart objects. When we copy smart objects using New Smart Object via Copy, or the Copy Layer button here in the panel, we get what's called an unlinked raw smart object. So it's a copy of this one, but these are not linked to each other, they're independent, and that's why whichever one I select, we get a blue border, and that tells us that these smart objects are raw smart objects, but they're not linked to each other. But if I were to make a duplicate of this raw smart object by instead using Duplicate Layer, now it's a raw smart object, but we get an orange border because this is telling us that this is a raw smart object that's linked to another one, the one I copied it from or duplicated it from. So if I click on that one, now we see that these both are showing orange. So these two are linked to each other. And this one is still an independent raw smart object that is not linked to the other two. So there we get a blue border. So if you use smart objects in Photoshop, you can understand how useful that indicator is in identifying what kind of smart object you're dealing with. The Close TK and Close User checkboxes determine how the TK action menu and User action menu behave. When the boxes are checked, then the menus will close automatically as soon as you run one of the actions. If you uncheck these boxes, then the TK and User action menus will remain open even after you run an action, and the only way to get them closed will be to click the X button. This could be useful if you typically run multiple actions one after the other, so you don't have to keep opening the menu. The free tutorials link takes you to a page on Tony Kuiper's website where you can download the written TK8 instructions and all of the written tutorials on luminosity masks that he's compiled over the years. This link takes you to Tony Kuiper's homepage, and Copyright Info opens a window showing information about Tony's copyright to TK8. Okay, next up we're going to begin looking at what all the different buttons here in the Combo and CX module are for, and there are a bunch of them.